Study Session 5. Conflict in the International System. Introduction. While there may be formal and informal rules that give rise to a type of international system structure, the phenomenal growth of conflict in the international system is inevitable. In this study session, we shall examine the wide range of issues that can cause conflict in the international system. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this study session, you should be able to examine the causes of conflict and discuss the various types of conflict. Causes of conflict. Broad generalizations about the causes of conflict have been difficult to be defined or explained. Conflicts do not have a single or simple cause. Many theories about conflicts have been put forward, but few have universal validity. Levels of analysis can help us organize these theories. In Man, the State, and War, Kenneth Waltz posits that the international system is the primary framework of international relations. But that framework exists all the time. So, to explain why sometimes conflicts actually occur and sometimes they do not, we also need to consider the other levels of analysis. Waltz identified 3 levels of analysis which can be applied to explain the causes of war. These levels are individual. Both the characteristics of individual leaders and the general attributes of the people have been blamed for conflicts. Some individual leaders are aggressive and most of the time argue. They use their leadership positions to further their causes. Thus, according to some realists and liberals, conflict occurs because of the personal characteristics of major leaders. State. The second level of explanation suggests that conflict occurs because of the internal structure of states. States vary in size, geography, ethnic homogeneity, and economic and political preferences. The question to ask ourselves is, how do the characteristics of different states affect the possibility of conflict? Which state structures are most correlated with the propensity to engage in conflict? Reflection. Democracies are peaceful because democratic norms and culture inhibit the leadership from taking actions leading to conflict. Democratic leaders hear from multiple voices that tend to restrain decision makers and therefore lessen the chance of conflict. There are 2 contending views on the analysis of conflict at the state level. First is that of the liberals, which posits that democratic states are least likely to be engaged in conflict. That is the basic position of the theory of the democratic peace. Democracies are peaceful because democratic norms and culture inhibit the leadership from taking decisions or actions leading to conflict. Democratic leaders hear from multiple voices that tend to restrain decision makers and therefore lessen the chance of conflict. Such states provide outlets for individuals to voice opposing viewpoints, and structural mechanisms exist for replacing conflict-prone or aggressive rulers. To live in such a state, individuals learn the art of compromise. In the process, extreme behavior like involving in conflict is curbed, engaged in periodically, and then only if necessary to make a state-owned democracy safe. Hint: conflict occurs because of the internal structure of states. States vary in size, geography, ethnic homogeneity, and economic and political preferences. The second is that in which Marxists or radical theorists belong. It offers the most thorough critique of liberalism and its economic counterpart, capitalism. They argue that capitalist liberal modes of production inevitably lead to conflict between the two major social classes within the state, the bourgeoisie and the proletariats, for both economic dominance and political leadership. This struggle leads to conflict both internally and externally, as the state dominated by the entrenched bourgeoisie is driven to expand the engine of capitalism at the expense of the proletariat and for the economic preservation of the bourgeoisie. International system. To realists, the anarchical international system is governed only by a weak overarching rule of law, which is easily dispensed with when states determine it is in their self-interest to do so. States themselves are the authority and ultimate arbiters of disputes. This is where sovereignty reigns. Thus, it is states that, when feeling threatened, decide to engage in conflict against another. Thus, on all the levels of analysis, competing theories offer different explanations for why some conflicts become violent and others do not. For these reasons, political scientists cannot yet predict with any confidence which of the world's many international conflicts will lead to war. We can gain insight, however, by studying various types of conflicts to understand better what states are fighting about. Types of international conflicts. There are 6 types of international conflicts: ethnic, religious, ideological, territorial, governmental, and economic. The first 3 are conflicts of ideas. The last 3 are conflicts over interests. You must put into consideration that these 6 types of conflicts are not mutually exclusive, and they overlap considerably in practice. Ethnic conflict. Ethnic conflict is quite possibly the most important source of conflict in numerous wars now occurring throughout the world. Ethnic groups are large groups of people who share ancestral, language, cultural, or religious ties and a common identity that individuals identify with the group. Although conflicts between ethnic groups often have material aspects, notably over territory and government control, ethnic conflict itself arose from a dislike or hatred that members of one ethnic group systematically feel toward another ethnic group. Ethnic conflict is thus not based on tangible causes, that is, what someone does, but on intangible ones, that is, who someone is. Religious conflicts. One reason ethnic conflicts often transcend material grievances are that they find expression as religious conflicts. Religion is the core of a community's value system. In much of the world, people whose religious practices differ are easily disrespected and treated as unworthy or even inhuman. When overlaid on ethnic and territorial conflicts, religion often surfaces as the central and most visible division between groups. For example, most people in northern Nigeria are Muslims. Most southern Nigerians are Christians. This is a very common pattern in ethnic conflicts. Tip: when overlaid on ethnic and territorial conflicts, religion often surfaces as the central and most visible division between groups. Although members of different religious groups coexist peacefully, but religious differences hold the potential to make existing conflicts more intractable because religions involve core values which are held as absolute truth. This is written by Appleby in 2000. This is increasingly true as fundamentalist movements have gained strength in recent decades. Members of these movements organize their lives and communities around their religious beliefs. Many are willing to sacrifice, die, and kill for those beliefs. Fundamentalist movements have become larger and more powerful in recent decades in Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and other religions. In India, for example, Hindu fundamentalists have provoked violent clashes and massacres that have reverberated internationally. In 2002, a strong emotion of burning, torturing, and raping by Hindu nationalist extremists killed nearly 1,000 Muslims in India's Gujarat state, where the Hindu Nationalist Party controls the state government. In Israel, Jewish fundamentalists have used violence, including the assassination of Israel's own prime minister in 1995, to derail Palestinian-Israeli peace negotiations. This is according to Goldstein and Peavehouse in 2011. Since we talk of fundamentalism, it is interesting to note that fundamentalist movements challenge the values and practices of secular political organizations, that is, those created apart from religious establishments. Another instance is that Christian fundamentalists in the United States persuade their government to withdraw from the United Nations Population Fund because of the organization's view on family planning and abortion. Each of these actions run counter to the norms of the international system. Ideological conflicts. To a large extent, ideology is like religion. It symbolizes and intensifies conflicts between groups and states more than it causes them. For realists, ideological differences among states do not matter much because all members of the international system pursue their national interests in the context of relatively fluid alliances. For example, the Cold War was a global ideological struggle between capitalist democracy and communism. But the alliances and military competitions in that struggle were fairly detached from ideological factors. In the same view, even countries that experience revolutions based on strong ideologies tend to lose their ideological fervor, be it Iran's Islamic fundamentalism in 1979, China's Marxist communism in 1949, Russia's Leninist communism in 1917, or even United States democracy in 1776. In each case, the revolutionaries expected that their assumption of power would dramatically alter their state's foreign policy because in each case, their ideology had profound international implications. Yet, within a few decades, each of these revolutionary governments turned to the pursuit of national interests above ideological ones. Tip: ideological differences among states do not matter much because all members of the international system pursue their national interests in the context of relatively fluid alliances. Lastly, ideology and political philosophies do play some role in international politics. In this respect, ideologies can help mobilize national populations such as in war. For instance, fascism inflamed German nationalism before World War II, legitimizing German aggression by placing it in an ideological framework. In some proxy wars of the Cold War era, such as Vietnam in the 1950s and Nicaragua in the 1980s, the rebels and government had real ideological differences. Territorial disputes. Among the international conflicts that concern tangible goods, those about territory have special importance because of the territorial nature of the state. Conflicts over control of territory are really of two variables: territorial disputes about where borders are drawn, and conflicts over control of governments. Inasmuch as states value home territory with an almost fanatical devotion, border disputes tend to be among the most unresolved in international relations. The goal of regaining territory lost to another state is called irredentism. This form of nationalism often leads directly to serious interstate conflicts. Examples are Ethiopia and Eritrea, and Morocco and Polisario. Thus, the value states place on home territory seems undiminished despite the apparent reduction in the inherent value of territory as technology has developed. Reflection: inasmuch as states value home territory with an almost fanatical devotion, border disputes tend to be among the most unresolved in international relations. Control of governments. Despite the many minor border disputes that continue to affect the world, most struggles to control territory do not involve changing borders. Rather, they are conflicts over which governments will control entire states. In theory, states do not interfere in each other's governance because of the norm of sovereignty. In practice, however, states often have strong interests in the governments of other states and use a variety of means of leverage to influence who holds power in those states. These conflicts over government take many forms, some mild and some severe, some deeply associated with third parties, and some or less bilateral. Sometimes, a state merely exerts subtle influences on another state's elections. At other times, a state supports rebel elements seeking to overthrow the second state's government. For instance, during the Cold War, both superpowers actively promoted changes of government in countries of the global south through covert operations and support for rebel armies. The civil wars in Angola, Afghanistan, and Nicaragua are good examples. Both superpowers poured in weapons, money, military advisors, and so forth, all in hopes of influencing who controlled the country's government. Economic conflict. Economic competition is the most pervasive form of conflict in international relations because economic transactions are pervasive. Every sale made and every deal reached across international borders entails a resolution of conflicting interests. Costa Rica wants the price of coffee, which it exports, to go up. Canada, which imports coffee, wants the price to go down. Angola wants foreign producers of Angolan oil to receive fewer profits from oil sales. Those companies' home states want them to take more profits. In a global capitalist market, all economic exchanges involve conflicts of interest. Activity. Make a list of border disputes that have resulted in international conflicts. Study session summary. In this study session, we learned how the levels of analysis can help us to understand the causes of conflict at the international system. They are individual, state, and global levels. However, when violent means are used as leverage in international conflicts, a variety of types of conflicts results. International conflicts include ethnic, religious, ideological, territorial, government, and economic. End of study session 5. Thanks for listening.